Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Dr. Jocker's Functional Nutrition Podcast. And I've got my friend, Dr. Tracy Gapin here, and he's a board-certified urologist, a men's health expert. He's an author and speaker who specializes in precision medicine. He wrote a great book called M.A.L.E. 2.0, Cracking the Code to Limitless Health and Vitality. And you can find out more about him at tracygapin.com. But I've known Dr. Tracy now for a few years. And not only is he an award-winning urologist, really respected in his field, but he really has a passion to help men improve their health. You know, a big component of that is testosterone. We're going to talk about that in this podcast. But there's so many men who neglect their health. And, as men, we really need to be pillars. We need to be leaders in our families. And we need to, basically really demonstrate for our kids how to take good care of our body. And there's so many men that are just falling short of that and hurting their own lives. And obviously it's affecting their family as well. And so, Dr. Tracy, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, David.
Absolutely. Well, let's share your story. I mean, I know that you obviously went through medical school. You're a urologist. So now how did you get into your concierge practice now, seeing patients and really helping men to improve their health naturally?
Yeah. So I've been practicing urology for over 20 years now. As a board certified urologist, I've been heavily focused on men's health ever since the 1990s, really. And it's interesting you mentioned men neglecting their health, because as I was entrenched in my medical practice, taking care of my patients, I ran myself ragged, and I hit a wall where I wasn't taking care of myself. I was overweight. I wasn't sleeping well, and I wasn't taking care of myself. I was eating like crap. I wasn't sleeping. I was stressed out, and wasn't really exercising very much because I didn't prioritize that. And I felt it. And so I hit a wall where I decided it's time to finally see an actual doctor myself. And doctors are horrible at seeing doctors. And so I went for my first physical ever. And it was really eye-opening, David. My cholesterol was sky high. My creatinine, which is a measure of kidney function, was poor. I was overweight, and I was suddenly faced with my own mortality. And it's a terrifying experience. What was worse, and I talk about this in my new book, M.A.L.E. 2.0, I talk about this whole experience in detail. But what was really worse was this medical doctor who I respect greatly here locally in town. He said, look, Tracy, you need to exercise more, maybe eat some more vegetables, and take a statin. That was it. That's all he had, those three things: exercise, eat more vegetables, and take a statin. And that to me was a big eye opener. And it made me kind of step back and recognize that there's something missing here, and that there has to be more to it than that. And I'm friends with a large group of functional medicine doctors like yourself, and other doctors in the epigenetics space and the anti-aging space and the hormone optimization space, all these different communities that I'm a part of now. But back then I just knew something was missing. And so that got me obsessed and on a quest with learning, how do I take care of myself? How do I reverse and upgrade my health? And how do I provide the same care for the men who trust me with their care? Because I realized that I didn't really have the answers either. And if my primary care doctor didn't, and I don't, then who does? And so it made me recognize the flaws of Western traditional medicine. And that I'm guilty of it as well, in that we are trained, our medical education, residency program, and everything is based on disease model medicine, which is, you have a symptom, a complaint, a problem. I diagnose your disease, quote unquote, and I treat it. And that's it. And I get you back to, homeostasis or baseline. There's no attempt to actually optimize or upgrade your health beyond that. And that was really where I was, where I wasn't overtly sick, but I was far, far, far from healthy. And so that got me into epigenetics and the science of lifestyle, and into functional medicine, and into anti-aging protocols. And I discovered peptides, and I discovered all these amazing ways that we can take a personalized, data-driven approach to optimizing health and not just being unsick, if you will.
Yeah, it's good. And I really want to get into the precision medicine that you actually practice now.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about some of the major issues you're seeing that men are suffering with.
Yeah, great question. So I see in my practice every day, men come in and they're struggling with Low energy and fatigue is probably one of the most common complaints I see. Cannot lose weight. Some guys are morbidly obese. Other guys have about 10 to 20 pounds that they just cannot shake no matter what they do. And they're doing the wrong stuff. They don't really know what to do. They're out, jogging 2 or 3 miles a day and or doing keto or doing this or that without really understanding why they're doing what they're doing and whether it's the right thing for them or not. I see men who are struggling with cognitive focus. I see a lot of executives and wealth advisors and C-suite guys. And these guys, their livelihood, their careers depend on them being sharp and at their peak. And when they're in a brain fog all day, they're not going to succeed. So I see a lot of that. And then a ton of men with sexual health issues, with low libido, with some occasional performance issues. And it's interesting that a lot of guys will neglect all the other stuff. They'll put up with the low energy. They'll put up with the weight gain and chalk it up to just natural aging and think that there's nothing that can be done about it. But it's interesting that often the libido issue or the sexual health issues is what gets them finally in the office. And then we can dive deep into all the issues that they're dealing with.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And this is really common. There's a lot of people that are dealing with these issues. And so let's talk about epigenetics. I know you mentioned that term. So let's go into that in more detail, what that means.
Sure. So epigenetics is a term that simply means above the genes. And what we mean by that is our genetic code is fixed. Our DNA is a long chain of base pairs, of nucleotide base pairs. And that code, if you will, was given to you by your parents. And that really never changes for the most part. But we see that in twin studies that if the twins are each living in a different environment, they grow up differently and their health risks change based on their environment. And so that's the best example of epigenetics, of how our lifestyle and our environment directly affect genetic expression. And by that, I mean how your body actually functions. You have the code, but epigenetics is like a dimmer switch where it turns genes on or off, up or down, and it regulates the expression of these genes. And that has everything to do with how your body performs. So we can look at, what you eat. I know your podcast is huge on nutrition, and we can look at how what you eat is intimately associated with and affects your genetic expression. So there are some people who do very well with a low complex carb diet, whereas other people will actually lose weight better with a higher complex carb diet. And I like to emphasize here, asterisk, that does not mean the cupcakes and the donuts and the pasta and the we're talking complex carbs here, not the simple carbs like the refined sugars and the processed, gluten and all the other, white flour kind of foods. So we can look at genetics to understand how your body handles fat, for example. The most commonly discussed gene is the ApoE gene, and the ApoE gene is a gene that determines how your body processes saturated fat. And for some people with what we call the ApoE4 variant, those people, if you give them a lot of saturated fat, they're at a markedly increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. We're talking like 12 times increased risk of Alzheimer's disease and early cardiovascular disease and mortality. So wouldn't you like to know if you're an ApoE4 variant, in which case, you would want to limit your saturated fat intake, and then that would subsequently have a dramatic effect on your outcomes. So we can use genetics, and this is what precision medicine dives into, is really taking your genetic blueprint and then applying epigenetics to it, where you style your lifestyle, you craft your daily life around your genetics to really optimize your outcomes.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And let's talk about some lifestyle strategies that you teach in your book. Like, what are things men can do? Obviously, understanding what their genetics are and patterning their nutrition around that is good. Now, what are some basic advice for somebody who hasn't had their genes tested?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely, David. So in my book, I dive into what I call the M.A.L.E method, which is my way of approaching men's health. And the M.A.L.E method is an acronym where M is mindset, A is aging, L is lifestyle, and E is environment. And I dive into each of those from a general perspective for anyone who has not had their genetics done yet. And then I talk more in more detail about how you can apply your specific genetics in each of these cases. But with mindset, the first thing I like to start with men is, what is your why? Why are you doing this? Why are you making a change? Why do you care about these decisions that we're talking about? If a man is simply doing or implementing these changes because their wife is nagging them or because of some superficial reason, it's not going to stick. It's like a diet where it's never going to work. But if you recognize some intrinsically important, and typically it's emotional, typically it's an underlying emotional, they have a need to feel loved by their spouse, for example. They have a need to feel accepted or that they're attractive by their spouse. Those kind of intrinsic deep meanings, that's your why. And that helps guys stay motivated and want to make a change. That's first and foremost. Then in mindset, I really focus on limiting beliefs. A lot of guys think that, hey, aging is inevitable. I can't change this. Nothing I do is going to matter. And those are all limiting beliefs. Or, hey, I'll never be thin. I'll never look like that guy, Dr. Jockers over there. He looks amazing. I can't look like that guy there. So it's getting rid of these limiting beliefs and realizing that you can accomplish anything if you believe it, but it starts with mindset first. I talk about gratitude. I talk about mindfulness and meditation as well under the mindset category. Aging, I focus first and foremost on hormones. A lot of guys, it's testosterone, and testosterone is certainly a vitally important hormone. And we're experiencing an epidemic in men's health where testosterone levels have plummeted over the last 30 years. And that's multifactorial from a lot of different causes, such as chemicals in our environment and Western diet and sugar and stress and so on. But first I focus on testosterone, but then I also look at optimizing thyroid, cortisol, insulin, DHEA, melatonin. All these other hormones are it's like a symphony, and you can't focus on just one of them. And so I really look at each and every one of those and how can we optimize them. Under aging, I also look at mitochondrial function. I look at cellular efficiency, like autophagy, which is how your cells clean up and take out the trash, so to speak. Yeah. Under L, lifestyle, focus on obviously nutrition is a critical aspect of health. And I know you emphasize that greatly here, so I won't spend a ton of time on that, but it's, from a general perspective, people tend to eat too much sugar. First and foremost, refined sugars is really the evil in our society, with a close second being omega-6 polyunsaturated fats. The corn oils and the soybean oils are crushing us from a cardiometabolic standpoint. And so it's eating good, whole, quality, real food, organic, if you will, fruits and vegetables, organic lean meats, fishes, if you're going to eat, if you're not a vegetarian. It's getting down to the basics and eating food that you like. And the recipes you provide are amazing recipes where you can actually enjoy the food you're eating. But you have to enjoy it, and you have to, focus on the good quality foods. Under the lifestyle category, I also talk about stress and sleep. One of the most overlooked aspects of our health is sleep. And sleep has a dramatic effect on our cortisol levels, our insulin levels, on testosterone, on our ability to burn fat and lose weight, cognitive focus, on everything. And sleep has been associated with early risk of Alzheimer's disease as well. And so good quality sleep is critical. And I see so many men who tell me, I sleep fine. I sleep 6.5, 7 hours a night, no problem. Well, I put a wearable device on them like a Garmin or an Oura Ring, and suddenly we realize that their deep sleep, which is the key restorative stage of sleep, sucks. Yeah. And that may be because they're taking medications, they're drinking alcohol, or maybe they're eating the wrong foods before bedtime, or maybe just poor sleep hygiene, a lot, melatonin issues, circadian rhythm issues. So it's diving deep into sleep, and that's probably one of the most critical aspects of health that men tend to overlook.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Most men they're just driving so hard.
Yeah. It's easy to keep going. It's midnight. Hey, I'll just work a little bit longer here, get this done. Sleep, if you don't restore your body, if you don't heal and recover, you're never going to reach peak performance. You're just not. You think that you can keep pushing your engine in the red. After a while, it's not going to make it. So,
and I know in your book also you talk about tracking heart rate variability.
Yeah, exactly.
Oura Ring, like I've got one.
Perfect. Yeah.
So what is heart rate variability? How is that going to impact our health?
So stress is the next aspect of lifestyle, and heart rate variability is a surrogate, if you will, for stress. So heart rate variability, for your listeners, is a measure of the variation in your heartbeat from one beat to the next. So when you check your heart rate and your pulse, it says 60, let's just say. It's technically not truly 60. Each beat, it may be 59.97, 60.01, 60.03, 59.99. That little bit of variation doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's actually everything. Because that variation is actually your body's dynamic flexibility to the environment, to the situation, to your surroundings. And that is regulated by your nervous system. And we have a parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and relaxed state. And we have the sympathetic, which is the stressed, which is the fight or flight tendency. And so we want the parasympathetic tone to override the sympathetic tone. And that will equate to a higher heart rate variability, which equates to of a relaxed, of a calm, of a rested and recovered state. Mm-hmm. If you have low heart rate variability, in contrast, you are stressed out, you are not fully recovered, you are in a poorly, minimally dynamic state and poor health. And so we can use heart rate variability on literally on a daily basis to look at this statistic, this biometric data point that we can gather from wearable devices to know our body's physiology and how we're dealing with our surroundings and our environment. Great example is I had a guy who I love to tell the story. He would have great, high, stable heart rate variability all week, but on Fridays it was terrible. It plummeted by 15 points. And we're like, what is going on? Why is your heart rate variability so low on Fridays? Why are you in such a bad state? And we know exercise, is a stress, which is actually a good hormetic stress. Yeah. But something was going on once a week. And we found out that was his date night with his wife. And they go out drinking. Thursday night was his big night to go out drinking. And it was dramatic to see the effect on his physiology from that one night of drinking. And this is not to say you can't have an occasional drink, glass of wine or whatever, but to recognize the amazing, powerful impact it has on your health, that it makes you think twice about your daily lifestyles and what's truly important. And I see so many men, just the alcohol, for example, they drink way too much and they don't think that's a problem. And so seeing the data, it doesn't lie, and it kind of helps you put into perspective. So heart variability is a great surrogate or way to track your stress levels. Yeah. And then finally, E is environmental exposures. So E is endocrine disruptors and chemicals in our environment that are crushing our health, crushing our testosterone, causing autoimmune disease, causing issues with obesity and diabetes and weight gain and even risk of cancers. So endocrine disruptors are chemicals in our environment that are directly impacting our health. The biggest ones in men's health are ones that affect testosterone levels, like BPA or bisphenol A is commonly found in plastics, like plastic water bottles. Phthalates are seen in our packaging for food, like plastic food containers, for example, lining our metal cans, for example. Personal care products like deodorant and soap and shampoo and laundry detergent. Our food, if you're not eating organic, our crops are sprayed with atrazine. Atrazine is the second most commonly used herbicide behind glyphosate. And atrazine in very low levels will turn male frogs into female frogs that actually lay eggs. Yeah. It's powerful. And we're having an exponentially higher level of atrazine detected in our drinking water and in our non-organic foods. So it's so critical that we pay attention to these environmental exposures. People tend to blow them off, but it's a big deal, and there's real science behind the powerful effect it has on our health.
What are some things people can do to reduce their exposure to these?
Yeah, great question. So we can use apps. There's a Healthy Living app made by the Environmental Working Group that I love, where you can actually take a barcode of a product like a soap or deodorant product on the shelf, and it'll tell you the ingredients. I would stay away from scented products. I would stay away from any product that has benzenes in it. You want to especially be careful with things like sunscreen. A lot of the typical sunscreens out there are loaded with these chemicals. When it comes to our foods, I would really emphasize organic. If you're going to eat meat, grass-fed organic meat, organic fresh fruits and vegetables as well. I would really minimize plastics. One of the big culprits here that people don't think about are plastic water bottles, which I think the statistic was we go through 1 million water bottles a minute on this earth, and wow. Most of them are not recycled. So plastic water bottles is a big deal. K-cups is the other big one. People don't think about this, but plastics, they emit or they release these chemicals more when they're hot. And K-cups, what do? It gets heated up with hot water. And so I'm a coffee addict. And so, I don't use K-cups at all. I use a traditional coffee pot for brewing coffee, for example.
Yeah.
Use the
You can
app
drink it in like stainless steel, right? If it's
Yes,
something hot, or like,
absolutely.
your traditional mugs, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, and then glass bottles, right, for water.
Absolutely. I use a stainless steel, like a Yeti
Yep.
type bottle.
Yeah,
Simple Modern
exactly.
makes them as well. And I will filter my water. I use, for
Yep.
example, a Berkey water filter
Yep.
that has the carbon filter to get rid of, estradiol, for example, is detected at significant levels in our drinking water.
Yeah.
And so estradiol is what's found in synthetic birth control pills that women take.
Yeah. So
And it
people,
doesn't
their
go
urine,
away.
they're peeing them out, or they're flushing it down
Yes.
the toilet, or whatever it
And it
is.
gets
Yeah.
recycled, but it doesn't get
Yeah.
broken down. Exactly. Yeah. So a water filter is really critical. You can use a Berkey. There's a great under sink one that I like to recommend as well. There's also a whole system. We're building a house right now, so I'm installing
Yep.
a whole house system as well to be sure that it's filtered.
Yep.
But all these things, it's a soup of endocrine disruptors, I like to say. So, just think of milk, for example. There was a study that looked at young boys. They would take whole milk off the grocery store shelf, and they had these boys drink milk, and they simply tested their testosterone levels before and an hour after drinking milk. It was 50% lower an hour after drinking milk.
Wow.
So it's a dramatic effect, and milk is a perfect example. These cows are eating the crops, which are laden with atrazine. The cows are being injected with synthetic hormones. Then the milk is being stored in plastic lined containers.
There you
So
go.
it's just layer after layer of endocrine disruption.
Plus, they
And
got
so,
antibiotics in there too, and antibiotics can have an impact.
absolutely, yeah. And it all adds up. It has a combined effect. There was another study that looked at 20 individuals, and they measured 20 different endocrine disruptors, and they all had at least 19 different chemicals in their urine. So it's everywhere, and I emphasize that you really need to be proactive about all this stuff. This stuff doesn't just happen. It's being intentional. It's living with intention and being proactive about your health. And that's really what M.A.L.E 2.0 is taking a completely different approach from the disease model of just waiting for disease to happen.
Yeah, that's really good information. And there's some things you can do also, not only just reducing your exposure, which is where it all starts, but you can do things like infrared sauna to help
Yes,
sweat these
absolutely.
things out. Exercise. I know you talk about exercise in the book, but exercise, getting your body sweating and breathing hard, will help you get rid of a lot of these things as well.
Yeah.
I always
Yeah.
tell my clients, you got to pee and poop out your toxins too, right?
That's right.
Open up those
Exactly.
detoxification channels.
That's right.
So
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
important. So what are some of the key, I know you talk about intermittent fasting and carb cycling in there, which I'm a huge fan of those things. So
Yeah.
can you describe more about how that can impact a man and help him really turn on his testosterone, optimize his hormones, and get the healthy one?
Sure. Yeah, dramatic, powerful impact that intermittent fasting can have on your life. So for listeners who may not be familiar, I'm sure most of them are, but intermittent fasting is basically time restricted feeding. It simply means to change when you're eating. It doesn't even mention what you're eating. It's simply focused on when you're eating. And by that, what we know is that if you can extend the time during which your body is not being fed, when you're in the rested state, your body can digest, it can recover, it can practice a process called autophagy, which is, again, how your cells clean out the debris, the metabolic cellular debris that is constantly being produced. And that improves the efficiency of your cell. And so time-restricted feeding is amazingly powerful for improving autophagy. It increases testosterone, it lowers cortisol, it helps with energy, it helps you lose weight, it helps with so many metabolic functions. It's pretty dramatic. Insulin sensitivity does increase growth hormone levels naturally as well. And so intermittent fasting is super easy. You simply fast or don't eat for at least a 16-hour time period. And the beginner level is fasting for 16 hours. The power way or the warrior way is to fast for 24 hours or longer. But for beginners, simply start with 16 hours. And the way I like to teach this just for newbies is, what time do you finish dinner? Let's say you finish dinner at 7 p.m. Add 4 hours, which is 11. And now 11 the next morning, 11 a.m. is when you eat again. And so after dinner, just don't eat anything that night. Drink water. If you want to have some hot tea, you can have hot tea with no sweetener. Drink a lot of water is fine. Go to bed, wake up, and consider skipping breakfast if you want to, but you're truly going to wait until 11 a.m. and then you're going to break your fast at that time. So actually, just before you and I got on our call here, I broke my fast and I had a protein shake, and that was about 17 hours for me, which is sometimes I go longer, sometimes shorter. This is not to torture yourself. So if you're dying and you really need, if you had a hard workout the day before and you have to eat something, then go ahead and eat, and make it at 16 hours. But the key is that you want to give your body time to rest, and typically the easiest way to do that is to incorporate nighttime in those 16 hours.
Yeah.
An optimal approach to it is to actually start eating when you wake up, and then eat for the 8 hours so that your 16-hour window starts late afternoon. And what that's doing is actually giving your body time to rest before you even go to bed. And so that's even the better approach for intermittent fasting, is to shift that 16-hour window so that the sleep period is at the end of your cycle of 16-hour resting rather than at the beginning. And then you can go to 24-hour, 48-hour fasting. I like to recommend that guys who are starting out do some intermittent fasting 2, maybe 3 days a week, and then 1 day a week or 1 day every other week. If you're starting, do a 24-hour fast. And that's water. Just drink water, nothing else. And it's powerful. It has an amazing effect.
Yep. No, I'm a huge fan of that. I actually do 2 fasts a week where I'm doing somewhere between 22 to 24 hours, somewhere in that range.
Sure.
And it's powerful. And like Wednesdays is my day. So I don't do any strength training that day, and I eat lunch and then I fast through dinner. Yep. And I don't eat again until lunch on Thursday. And you're right. Like, I sleep so much better. My heart rate variability is its best on that day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so
it has a dramatic effect on your physiology. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Works really good. And fasting, I always tell people fasting is like it's like building a muscle. So you got to work your way up, just like anything else, any sort of fitness routine that you're doing. Once you develop a level of fasting fitness, it gets a lot easier. And putting in that 24-hour fast is a great way to not only develop it, but also to maintain great fasting fitness and get your insulin levels stabilized, really optimize those hormones. So it's really powerful.
Definitely, without question. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a fantastic interview, Dr. Tracy. And, I just want to let everybody know he's got a great book where he goes through all this stuff. It's called M.A.L.E 2.0. You can find that at drtracygapin.com. Any last words of inspiration for our audience here?
Yeah, sure. And by the way, the book, if you go to drtracygapin.com/limitless, I have a free offer for a free book with just pay shipping right now. So limited time offer. Beautiful. on the book. Sure. But yeah, I think the key for men is to be proactive about your health. There's no longer time to just sit around and wait for disease to set in. And number 2 is you need to take a data-driven, personalized approach. There's a lot of one-size-fits-all models out there. Everyone's telling you do this, do that, but you got to use data such as tracking your sleep, tracking your stress, using your genetics to take a personalized approach so that you're not just shotgunning it. So you know exactly what's right for your body.
That's great. Great advice, guys. Go out, check out his book. We'll have the links in the show notes. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Dr. Tracy.
You got it, Dave.
Absolutely. And everybody out there, go out and start taking action. Be blessed.